process of ascension has three main territories to it: the subconscious mind and the semi-conscious mind. Then there's the level of the ego and the conscious mind, and the level of the superconscious, the realms of divinity. This is an upward moving process coming up from the collective unconscious, from the personal unconscious. That's going to filter into the conscious egoic mind. And from there, once you're able to work that out in the egoic mind, that energy is going to rise all the way up to the superconscious divine level. This can be analogized to be the same process that happens in the spine during meditation, when you're rising that energy up from the base of the spine, the root chakra, all the way up through the spinal column to the spiritual eye and out through the crown. So I'm going to explain each one of these parts, from the subconscious / semi-conscious / collective unconscious, then moving into the egoic personal consciousness, and then explaining the superconscious realms. So I'm going to start out with the unconscious, the collective unconscious, and more importantly, the personal unconscious. And the reason why it's important to discuss this, many of us that are spiritually minded, we just want to focus on that superconscious realm and focus on awakening and elevating our consciousness to those higher levels. And that is very good. That's a good thing to keep your eyes set on. But the problem is various tendencies and you could say some scaras or just traumas that we've experienced, those get acted out unconsciously. So it's important that we introspect and we realize what's going on here with the unconscious. So essentially what's going on is our life experiences that we've had then shape and mold who we become and certain neuroses that we act out. Things that happened in childhood, we got hurt and now we either protect ourselves or we neurotically move towards people. We neurotically move away from people. We neurotically just want to detach ourselves. And I think this is the case for a lot of us, is we want to detach ourselves from the situation as a mode of protection. And this, in a certain sense, is spiritual. And, all the various spiritual traditions teach us to be in the world, but not of it, to detach ourselves from the world. But the problem is when it's coming from a neurotic standpoint, it's a compulsion. It's not a choice that we're separating ourselves from the world. It's a compulsion that we're going to keep ourselves isolated and not connect with anyone emotionally and be very disconnected from our emotions. So if that's you, then it's really important that you kind of introspect and heal that trauma. And, it's very healthy to keep some level of detachment. And that detachment in itself is actually going to help you introspect and kind of be an observer to what's going on. But once you get really deep into what your internal conflicts are, that's when that kind of move away from tendency can reenact, and you can even move away from wanting to do the introspection and the work. And that's something I've experienced in my own self recently, is that when I'm really going deep and getting to the root cause of various issues I've experienced in my life, that's when it just feels a little heavy and I want to take a step back. But I found that if I kind of just, be compassionate to myself, and if I need to go on a walk or take a break, of course, if you're just really feeling really overwhelmed and you need a day off, be loving to yourself to give that. But at the same time, don't completely run away and shy away from the inner work and the introspection, because I found that when you're able to get past that resistance, it's actually not as bad as you thought. And when you're working through these things and allowing them to let go, there's going to be a painful process of that part of you is dying, but the energy and just the authenticity that you gain back in return is going to be so much worth it. And actually, I don't have the book next to me right now, but a lot of this kind of move towards these neuroses. There's a really good book by Karen Horney called Our Inner Conflict. So I'd recommend that if you kind of want to just have a simple sort of explanation for where this trauma comes from. So that's one aspect to it, and that's one way of looking at it. Now, I also want to talk about Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious and the archetypes. And to be quite honest with you, this isn't my favorite way of looking at reality. It's not, I feel like there's a little bit that's missing with this archetypal model, and that a lot of the times it's not moving forwards into the super consciousness. But in its own right, it is very important, and can be a useful way to look at things. Something I want to explain, and I do want to clear up this point of misconception, because this was something that confused me for a long time, and I do enjoy, the theory and reading about it. Was I kind of had the idea that these archetypes were like mystical or like spiritual sort of forces in one's life. However, recently I've come to understand that that's not the case. The archetypes are structures that come from the collective unconscious, not the superconscious. They have been embedded in the human unconscious due to them being very common situations that have occurred. There's been many warriors throughout history. There's been many magician archetypes, from shamans to yogis to just spiritual individuals. And there's the lover archetype. There's been so many romantic connections throughout human history, or just even the lover archetype as channeled toward the divine, or just loving life in general. So what ultimately is going to end up happening is you want to include and transcend the archetypes. You don't want to get caught up just acting out one archetype. You want to integrate it and, be able to tap into that sort of archetypal, and it can be very powerful energy. You want to integrate it and be able to tap into that, but you don't want that to be your whole identity. You don't want to get consumed and overtaken by an archetype. And that's what can happen. And that's why the sort of archetypal work can be important, because then you sort of have the capability to access different forces coming out of the collective unconscious. You have the ability to use that powerful force to actualize your dreams, to actualize your higher potential. But you don't want to let it overtake you. And, just to give an example personally, I've been really, and, I didn't even know about the archetypal model at the time, and you don't have to know about it. And you can still, even if you don't know the theory, you can still sort of do this work in different ways. But I was kind of really tapped into the magician archetype and wanting to learn the mysteries of spirit. And that's still very active in my life right now, of doing a lot of meditation and just kind of being tapped into, the higher realms, and learning a lot of what reality's all about. And even just recording videos on the internet, sharing this information. It's sort of a magician thing to do, to spread information in these ways. However, for a while, I was almost caught up too much in that archetype, to the neglect of other aspects of my life, of making a living in the material world, of human connection with other people. I was so in the magician archetype and so inwardly turned that I was neglecting other aspects. So that can be an example of why this work's important. Or perhaps, you're really into that warrior archetype and just making a lot of money, and it doesn't have to be money, but just going out and making a difference in the world. And that's kind of the energy I'm trying to integrate more currently. But if you're too caught up in that, to the neglect of the lover archetype, and and you're just kind of cut off from your emotions and you're a little bit cold in that sense. All of these various forces, it can be confusing. It was confusing for me for a while, like, what are these archetypes even? It's basically just forces coming from the unconscious that are active in all of our lives to one degree or another, and forces that we can tap into. So that's kind of the unconscious slash, and we're not fully conscious of it. So becoming more conscious of just what these forces are and kind of what's driving us coming up from the unconscious into our ego, becoming more aware of what's driving us there can be a huge benefit. And so there's the archetypes and there's also the instincts. And so you kind of want to be able to differentiate. Sometimes it's just an instinctual drive to survive, to act out in a certain way, to protect yourself. Introspecting and coming to terms with the instincts and a healthy way of relating to them is important as well. You don't want to completely neglect it, again, but you don't want to let it, because there are certain needs that we have. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're going to have to meet those instinctual base level needs for safety. And I'm actually not able to recall exactly what the steps of the hierarchy are, but you get the idea. We're going to have to meet our base level needs before and that's the idea I'm trying to kind of explain here. We're gonna have to meet those base subconscious level needs and work with those energies and have them kind of come into a balance before we can progress more. And there's still the possibility, even while doing that, you still want to keep one eye on where we're going ultimately, which is the superconscious spiritual sort of levels or just consciousness. You want to keep one eye there, and you want to keep doing that work as well, because what can also happen is when you're looking at all this unconscious and you're really diving deep into why you are the way you are and what unconscious forces are driving you, you don't want to let that consume you. You want to have a healthy level of detachment and also keep your eye on the spiritual level. So that's the unconscious slash semi-conscious. So yeah, there's those collective unconscious forces driving you, and then there's the personal unconscious, which is sort of just your trauma and what happened through your history and how you relate to the collective unconscious. So that's where you also want to do a lot of work and introspection. Moving on to the conscious level, the egoic personal level now. Those archetypal forces are coming up into your ego, and also your various traumas that you've had that you're currently unaware of. Just certain ways of operating, they're coming from the unconscious into your conscious mind. So I've already kind of touched upon this a bit. Your conscious mind and your ego is what's going to allow you to work through these forces. There's actually forces coming in from the unconscious and from the superconscious, and from the instincts and from the archetypes and from your personal traumas. So there's a lot to deal with. You have various sub-personalities inside of you that one part of you, and this is why life can be so difficult, because one part of you really wants to work on your business or just make progress in whatever your goal is at the moment. And the other part just really wants to relax and just feels a bit overwhelmed and tired. And, you might have, I'm trying to think of an example, like you might have an aggressive subpersonality that you developed from being hurt in childhood, that just wants to lash out at people, and you get angry sometimes. And I'm not saying this is you, I'm just giving a generic example. And then you might have another subpersonality that really just wants to detach and run away from the situation. So, and this doesn't even always apply to people, it can apply to life. So sometimes, that kind of aggressive part, you just want to attack the problem, maybe. but that's warring with the part of you that wants to then run away from this problem. It's a very basic example, and it can get much more nuanced and complex, but you'll just have to do the introspection yourself and see kind of what parts of you are warring against each other and causing a lot of internal conflict. That's why it shouldn't be as hard for us to make decisions as it is. You know, we can go back and forth trying to decide between certain issues. Like there's one part of us that wants to go over here, there's another part that wants to go over here, and then there's another part that wants to go over here. And so it just becomes a mess. So your job at the conscious egoic level is to sort through all of this and negotiate between these different parts of yourself and unify them, integrate them and unify them so that now you're moving as one force. You're not divided with some of your energy and your conscious energy over here, some of it's over here, and it's all mixed up and jumbled up. Doing the work to really work through your trauma and work through your life experiences and just introspect, see why you are the way you are, and sort of bring that all into a resolution, that's going to make you much more effective in life and able to know who you are, know exactly what your goals are, why you're doing it, identify your authentic values and what you want out of life. Because the other aspect to this is there's so much conditioning, social conditioning. I've talked about this in my other videos before. You learn what's good and what's bad, and you should go get a 9-to-5, and you should go get a family, you should be a doctor, whatever your family and whatever your society told you. Like, and it goes much more, that's just like a very basic example, but it goes so much deeper than that in terms of, you know, you might have been taught to, you're only valuable if other people like you. And so now you gotta suppress your own opinions to fit in with the collective. In some degree that is necessary, you know, so that just to smooth over life and make interactions easier. But ultimately you got to be authentic to yourself, and authenticity is so important. And that's why all this work is so important. You know, I'm focusing more here on the work on the unconscious. It's something that I neglected myself for a while, and it was holding me back from higher levels of spiritual development. Because, you know, I'd have those experiences in meditation, but I just wouldn't be able to hold that. There'd be another part of me that wanted something else. So just bringing that all into a cohesion makes you so effective. And what you're really doing is you're reclaiming your energy, because your energy is caught up in this neurotic pattern, and there's psychic energy going over to that mechanism, to that, oh, I have a compulsion to go consume a lot of media, to scroll on TikTok or Instagram, whatever it is. I have a compulsion to go partake in a substance, you know, and even throughout the day, this is pulling on your psychic energy and disrupting your focus. So when you're able to sort this out, and it can take a while, it's not going to happen overnight, you know, don't expect yourself to be perfect. Just work with yourself, and don't be afraid to really introspect and dive into this. You know, I've given some good book recommendations on this channel that'll help you do that. Even just sitting with yourself and journaling will help you. Meditation will certainly help you, because that's just going to make you more aware of what's going on inside of you. So on that note, let's kind of talk about now the superconscious realm. So at this point, you know, you're working with these energies, and you've reclaimed a lot of that energy that was caught up inside of your neurosis and your trauma. Now, the ego can consciously channel that energy forward and up into spiritual growth. Now you're free to use this energy to do what you authentically came here to do, to create from a spiritual level, from your intuition, from your higher self. Now you can bring that out and create something beautiful. And it's going to be coming not just out of survival, not just out of what you learned from society that's going to make you recognized, it's going to make you famous, it's going to make other people like you. You don't care about that anymore. And for some of us, we may not think we care about it, but then deep down, there's an unconscious motive that's why we're doing some of the things we're doing. I think a lot of you guys are really, whoever's watching this, like you are really authentic and you care about living life with integrity and moving things forward authentically. So all of this is just going to help you solidify that and make it even stronger to where you know what you're doing is authentic and you're loving it and it's who you are and it's what you came here to do. It's just going to provide so much more clarity once you've gone through the mud and sorted all that shit out and like you've gone through the swamp, like you've cleared out all this residue that's accumulated throughout your life. Now you're free to, first of all, you're just going to be feeling a lot better, a lot more joyful, a lot more happy, because that's what's underlying all of this. The only thing that everything around you is created out of is God's love and light. And you're going to be able to realize that more and more once you kind of get out of your own way with all the nonsense. And don't beat yourself up and don't feel bad about it, because this happens to all of us, especially in this time we're living in, of all the craziness that's going on, and just how neurotic society is as a whole. It's just going to happen. Like, it's going to happen to all of us in one way or another, but we have enough awareness and have enough love for ourselves to sort this out and then to come back authentically. When we were children, we didn't have a choice. We didn't know any better. We had to cope somehow. But now as adults, we have the choice to live life in a different way. So yeah, what's going to help channel that energy upward even more from the egoic level to the superconscious? Meditation, just namas and niyamas, just making good choices, living life in a balanced way, eating a healthy diet, regular exercise. You guys know what to do. You know what to do. You know what's healthy for you. You know what's good and what's not. And when you clear all that shit out of the unconscious, out of the subconscious mind, I should say, then you have the freedom to make the choice that's right for you. You may think that disciplining yourself, you probably don't really think this, but this is just how it feels sometimes. Is that like when you discipline yourself and make the healthy choice, you're kind of giving up a degree of your freedom of, oh, I want to have the freedom to go have fun. And I don't know how to say this, like, it's just when you start channeling your energy upward into the spiritual level, you'll know deep down from your intuition what's right for you and what the right choice is to make. And there may still be some residual resistance coming from those outdated patterns and whatnot. But the more you work through that and the more you channel your energy upwards to the spiritual level, the more you're going to be able to recognize what's truly authentic and what's not. And you're going to be able to develop your discrimination to the point where you find yourself making the right choice more and more and more, and it's going to become easier and easier and easier, and you're going to build a lot of momentum. So I'd recommend, even when you're in that season where you're doing a lot of the work on your unconscious and your subconscious and your outdated tendencies and trying to change and move things forward and find a new, more authentic mode of operating, I would still recommend keeping some sort of spiritual practice, whether it's meditation or hatha yoga or whatever it is for you. Probably what aligns for you. And if you don't, these videos will help you find that. So yeah, just keep one eye always on the spirituality, and just try and be present with your experience. Presence is another big key. Don't get too lost in the neurosis and fall back into that. Still stay a bit detached and stay present, and be that observer that's noticing what's going on somatically as well. A lot of the times we neglect the body and we just kind of think of ourselves as that mind, but be in the body, be aware of what's going on in the body, and work on that level as well. Ken Wilber, in his book, A Brief History of Everything, this is one of my favorite books. I'd highly recommend it. But he discusses various, it's a brief history of everything. He goes all the way from the time you're born to the highest levels of transpersonal development. And one of the stages along that path, kind of when you're transitioning, kind of along the border of transition from the personal to the transpersonal level, is called the centaur level. And what that level is when you're aware of the body and mind. You're the body and mind. There's no more separation between body and mind. In this Western culture especially, we often just think of ourselves as a mind that has a body, but we are the body and mind. At the highest levels of transpersonal development, okay, we're not the body or the mind, but at this level, we are the body and the mind, and it becomes an integrated unit instead of the body and mind fighting against each other, because the body, it remembers the traumas, it remembers what happens, the pains are cropping up, and then the mind just wants the body to be better and just doesn't pay a lot of attention to it. So this is another important aspect, respect the body and the mind, and kind of bring those two into a union, working together, more self-expression, more relaxation in the body. This is actually some work that I'm really focused on right now, because there's various, tensions and things stored in my body that I want to work out. And your body, in truth, a lot of the spiritual traditions, we think that we got to transcend the body so it doesn't matter. But the truth of the matter is, a healthy body is your foundation for a deep spiritual practice. Because if the body's not healthy, you're not going to be able to sit in meditation for a long time without being distracted. You're not going to be able to focus on tasks fully, because you're going to get little pains cropping up wherever, for me, in the shoulders and the neck and the back. It's just going to be a real nuisance. So that's also very important. And I'm planning on reading a lot of books on somatic psychology and things like this in the future. So stay tuned for that. That being said, thank you for watching, and I wish you the best on this, and I know you're going to kill it and make a lot of progress doing this work. I just started a Substack, and by the time this video releases, I'll have just released my first newsletter. So there'll be a link to that in the description if you want to subscribe. And if you made it this far, please like and subscribe the video, and I'll see you on the next one.